The pain you carry is not your enemy. It never was. Every sleepless night, every moment of anxiety gnawing at your chest, every wound that refuses to heal. This is not punishment. This is not cosmic cruelty. This is your higher self, knocking on the door of your consciousness, demanding to be heard. But you've been taught to silence it, to medicate it, to distract yourself from it, to call it weakness, to call it failure, to call it everything except what it truly is. The voice of your soul trying to guide you home. You've been conditioned to believe that pain is the opposite of growth, that suffering is the enemy of enlightenment. This is the first lie that must die tonight. Pain is not your obstacle, it is your teacher. It is not your punishment, it is your invitation. It is not your weakness, it is your strength disguised as vulnerability, asking you to finally listen. Every culture, every religion, every self-help guru has sold you the same poisonous dream. That life should be comfortable, that happiness is the default state, that pain is a deviation from the norm. They've convinced you that the goal is to eliminate suffering, to transcend difficulty, to rise above the messy, complicated reality of being human. But what if they were wrong? What if pain is not the problem but the solution? What if suffering is not the disease but the medicine? What if every moment of discomfort is actually your higher self breaking through the noise of your conditioned mind, trying to show you something essential about who you really are? The very fact that you can feel pain is proof of your aliveness. The very fact that you can suffer is evidence of your capacity for depth. The very fact that you can be wounded is testimony to your ability to love. And yet you've been taught to see these as weaknesses, as flaws in your design, as problems to be solved rather than gifts to be honored. Tonight, we shatter that illusion. Tonight, we recognize pain for what it truly is. The voice of your higher self, speaking to you in the only language that can cut through the layers of conditioning, the only frequency that can penetrate the walls you've built around your heart. From the moment you drew your first breath, the world began teaching you to fear your own depths. They told you to smile when you felt like crying. They told you to be strong when you needed to be held. They told you to push through when you needed to pause, to achieve when you needed to reflect, to perform when you needed to simply be. Your parents, with their own unhealed wounds, taught you that pain was something to be fixed, not felt. They meant well. They were trying to protect you from the same suffering they had endured. But in their protection, they inadvertently taught you to abandon yourself. They showed you how to betray your own inner voice, how to silence the very wisdom that was trying to emerge through your experience. When you cried as a child, they rushed to stop your tears instead of teaching you to feel them fully. When you expressed anger, they taught you to suppress it instead of showing you how to understand its message. When you felt fear, they tried to eliminate it instead of helping you listen to what it was trying to protect. Your teachers, drowning in their own silent struggles, showed you that success meant hiding your scars. They taught you that intelligence was about having the right answers, not about asking the right questions. They showed you how to perform, how to compete, how to achieve, but they never taught you how to feel, how to be present with difficulty, how to trust the intelligence of your own emotional landscape. In school, you learned to memorize facts but not to trust your intuition. You learned to follow rules but not to question authority. You learned to seek approval but not to honor your authentic voice. The very system designed to educate you was actually teaching you to disconnect from your inner wisdom, to doubt your own experience, to rely on external validation rather than internal knowing. Your culture, terrified of its own shadow, convinced you that happiness was the only acceptable emotion, that joy was the only worthy pursuit. They sold you products to numb the pain, strategies to avoid the discomfort, philosophies to transcend the very experiences that were trying to teach you something profound about the nature of existence itself. The billion-dollar industries built around avoiding pain, pharmaceutical companies promising chemical happiness, entertainment industries offering endless distraction, consumer culture selling temporary fixes. All of these are symptoms of a civilization that has forgotten the sacred purpose of suffering. And so you learned to abandon yourself. You learned to betray your own inner voice, You learn to call your intuition paranoia, your sensitivity weakness, your depth too much. You learn to live as a stranger in your own body, a foreigner in your own soul. But every time you ignored that whisper, every time you silenced that call, every time you chose numbness over feeling, the pain grew louder. Because pain is not your enemy. Pain is your higher self, refusing to let you disappear into the shallow waters of a life half-lived. The anxiety that keeps you awake at night, that's your soul telling you that the life you're living is too small for who you really are. The depression that weighs on your chest, that's your higher self mourning the parts of you that you've abandoned in order to fit into a world that doesn't understand your true nature. The restlessness that drives you from one distraction to another, that's your authentic self trying to break free from the prison of other people's expectations. Every addiction you've battled, every relationship that's failed, every dream you've abandoned, these are not signs of your weakness. These are your higher self's increasingly desperate attempts to get your attention, to show you that you're living someone else's life instead of your own. The ancient Greeks understood what we have forgotten, that suffering is not separate from wisdom, but the very pathway to it. They called it pathemathos, learning through suffering. Not suffering for its own sake, but suffering as the crucible in which the soul is refined, where the false self burns away and the true self emerges. Heraclitus, the philosopher of change, knew that conflict was the father of all things. He understood that without tension, without struggle, without the friction between opposing forces, there could be no growth, no evolution, no transformation. The river that flows smoothly never carves a canyon. The muscle that is never challenged never grows strong. The soul that is never tested never discovers its true power. Pain is consciousness attempting to expand. It is the universe pushing against the boundaries of who you think you are, inviting you to become who you truly are. It is the friction between your authentic self and the mask you've been wearing, the tension between your soul's truth and the world's expectations. The Buddha spoke of this truth 2,500 years ago, that suffering is not optional, but resistance to suffering is. That pain is inevitable, but the story we tell ourselves about that pain is where our freedom lies. He understood that the very attempt to avoid suffering creates more suffering, that the resistance to what is creates the very prison we're trying to escape. In his first noble truth, he declared that life contains dukkha, often translated as suffering, but more accurately understood as the inherent unsatisfactoriness of existence when we try to make permanent what is naturally impermanent. The pain you feel is not a mistake. It's the natural result of trying to hold on to what cannot be held, trying to control what cannot be controlled, trying to find permanent happiness in a world of constant change. When you feel that ache in your chest, that restlessness in your bones, that sense that something is missing, this is not evidence that you are broken. This is evidence that you are becoming. This is your higher self, that part of you connected to the infinite, reaching through the veil of your conditioned mind to touch your heart. Your pain is not random. It is precise. It points exactly to where your growth awaits, where your healing beckons, where your transformation calls. It is the GPS of the soul, guiding you toward the territories of yourself you have yet to explore. The mystics throughout history have known this secret, that the wound is where the light enters, that the crack in your heart is not a sign of damage, but a sign of opening, that the very thing you've been trying to avoid is the very thing that will set you free. Rumi wrote, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." He understood that our greatest pain often becomes our greatest gift, that our deepest wounds become our deepest wells of wisdom, that the very experiences we would rather avoid are often the ones that transform us most profoundly. Leonard Cohen sang, "There is a crack in everything, that's how the light gets in." He knew that perfection is not the goal, wholeness is. And wholeness includes the broken places, the wounded places, the places where we've been torn open by life and left vulnerable to both suffering and grace. There is a new way to be with your pain, not as victim but as student, not as someone who endures but as someone who listens, not as someone who suffers, but as someone who learns to dance with the difficult emotions that shape us into who we're meant to become. This new virtue is not the numbing of pain, but the honoring of it. It is not the escape from difficulty, but the embrace of it as teacher. It is not the pursuit of comfort, but the cultivation of courage, the courage to feel fully, to be present with whatever arises, to trust that your soul knows what it's doing even when your mind cannot understand. In this new paradigm, you no longer ask, "Why is this happening to me?" but, "What is this trying to teach me?" You no longer seek to eliminate the discomfort but to dialogue with it. You no longer run from the darkness but learn to see it as the fertile soil in which your light can take root. This virtue flows not from weakness but from the deepest strength, the strength to remain open when everything in you wants to close, to stay present when everything in you wants to flee, to trust when everything in you wants to control. Like the sun that shines equally on shadow and light, this new self illuminates every corner of your experience. Like the river that flows around every obstacle, this awakened being moves with grace through every challenge. Your pain becomes your portal. Your wounds become your wisdom. Your scars become your stories of triumph. Imagine a life where you no longer fear your own emotions. Imagine a life where you trust that every feeling has something important to tell you. Imagine a life where you see your sensitivity not as a curse, but as a superpower, the ability to feel deeply, to connect authentically, to respond to the subtle currents of existence that others miss entirely. This is not about becoming someone who enjoys pain or seeks out suffering. This is about becoming someone who can be present with whatever arises, who can find meaning in the midst of difficulty, who can trust the intelligence of their own experience, even when it doesn't make logical sense. When you learn to listen to your pain instead of silencing it, something miraculous happens. The very thing that was making you miserable becomes the doorway to your liberation. The very emotion you were trying to avoid becomes the key to your authentic power. The very experience you thought was evidence of your brokenness becomes proof of your wholeness. This new virtue recognizes that pain is not the opposite of peace, it is often the pathway to it. That suffering is not the enemy of joy, it is what makes joy possible. That darkness is not the absence of light, it is the canvas on which light becomes visible. In this understanding, you begin to see that your higher self uses pain as a sculptor uses a chisel, not to destroy, but to reveal. Every blow, every cut, every moment of pressure is removing what is not essential, revealing what is true, uncovering the masterpiece that was always there beneath the surface. The pain you've been avoiding is actually your higher self's way of saying, there is more to you than you know. There is deeper love available than you've allowed yourself to feel. There is greater purpose calling you than you've been brave enough to pursue. But even this virtue, this new way of being with pain, must eventually dissolve into something greater. Even this understanding, this relationship with suffering, must not become another identity to cling to, another story to tell yourself about who you are. There comes a moment when you must let go of being the one who transforms pain into wisdom. There comes a moment when you must release even the role of the spiritual seeker, the conscious sufferer, the enlightened being who has learned to dance with difficulty. In the deepest silence, beyond the need to understand, beyond the desire to heal, beyond the urge to become, there is simply presence. There is simply awareness, watching the waves of experience rise and fall without needing to name them, without needing to change them, without needing to be anything other than the space in which they appear. This is the ultimate teaching of pain, that even the teacher must disappear, that even the lesson must be forgotten, that even the wisdom must dissolve back into the vast silence from which it emerged, like the ocean that receives all rivers without becoming any of them, like the sky that holds all clouds without being disturbed by them, like the silence that contains all sounds without being broken by them. You are the space in which all experience arises and passes away. In this silence, you discover that you were never broken. You discover that there was never anything to fix. You discover that the pain was not a problem to be solved, but a doorway to be walked through. A doorway that leads not to somewhere else, but to here, to now. to the infinite depth of this very moment. The pain that once seemed so solid, so permanent, so overwhelming reveals itself to be like everything else in existence, temporary, flowing, constantly changing. And in seeing its impermanence, you begin to see your own eternal nature, the awareness that remains constant through all the changing experiences of your life. This is where true freedom lives, not in the absence of pain, but in the recognition that you are not your pain. Not in the elimination of suffering, but in the understanding that you are not your suffering. Not in the transcendence of difficulty, but in the realization that you are the awareness in which all difficulty appears and disappears. In this silence, even your higher self dissolves into something beyond naming. Even the teacher becomes the taught. Even the seeker merges with the sought. There is only this moment, only this breath, only this eternal now, in which all of existence dances. This is the final gift of pain, not just the wisdom it teaches, but the peace that comes from recognizing that you are not the pain, you are not the emotions, you are not even the one who transforms suffering into wisdom. You are the vast, spacious awareness in which all of these experiences arise and pass away. The silence is not empty, it is full of infinite potential. The stillness is not static, it is alive with creative power. The peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence that embraces all conflict without being disturbed by it. If these words have stirred something within you, if you recognize the truth of your pain as your higher self's invitation, then make this commitment. Write, in the comments below, I choose to listen to what my pain is teaching me. This is not just words on a screen. This is a declaration to your soul that you are ready to stop running, ready to stop numbing, ready to stop pretending that the shallow waters of distraction are enough for a being as vast as you. This is your moment of choice. This is your invitation to step into a new relationship with your own experience. This is your opportunity to transform from someone who is victimized by their emotions into someone who is guided by them. Every time you choose to listen instead of avoiding, every time you choose presence instead of distraction, every time you choose courage instead of comfort, you are answering your higher self's call. You are saying yes to the fullness of your own experience. You are choosing to live as the conscious, aware, awakened being you came here to be. Continue this journey. Let the next video find you. Let the next teaching arrive. Let your pain continue to be your guide, your teacher, your invitation into the fullness of who you are meant to become. Remember that this is not a one-time decision but a daily practice. Each morning you wake up with the choice to either listen to your higher self or to continue living in the trance of unconsciousness. Each moment of pain is a new opportunity to practice presence, to choose awareness, to trust the intelligence of your own experience. The sun sets each day only to rise again transformed. The river empties into the ocean only to return as rain. Your pain, honored and heard, will transform into wisdom, will dissolve into love, will become the very foundation upon which your authentic life is built. Remember, every moment of discomfort is a moment of potential awakening. Every feeling you've been avoiding is a doorway to deeper understanding. Every wound you carry is a place where light can enter. Your higher self is not separate from you. It is you, awakened to your own depth, connected to your own truth, aligned with your own purpose. And it speaks to you most clearly through the very experiences you've been taught to avoid, the pain you feel right now, the discomfort you've been carrying, the emotions you've been suppressing. These are not obstacles to your spiritual growth. They are the very path itself. They are your higher self's way of calling you home to yourself, calling you back to the truth of who you really are. Listen, trust, allow. Your higher self is calling, and it's using your pain as its voice. The question is not whether you will experience pain. You will. The question is whether you will let that pain awaken you or continue to let it imprison you. Choose awakening. Choose consciousness. Choose to let your pain be your teacher, your guide, your doorway to the magnificent being you came here to become. Your higher self is waiting. Your pain is the invitation, your choice is now.